In Osogbo, the state capital, the chairman of Ward 12, Osogbo local government area, Osogbo, where the suspended chairman hails from, Mr. Hamid Sheriff, accused Mr. Adebayo of defrauding the party and also mismanaging party resources. Reacting to his suspension, Mr. Adebayo notes that his suspension cannot stand and is of no consequence. Kaduna State Governor Uba Sani says the government is working out a sustainable partnership with the local government to tackle the challenges of insecurity and other socioeconomic problems plaguing the state. At a meeting with the chairman of the 23 local government areas of Kaduna State, the governor says his administration will adopt an inclusive approach in the execution of his rural transformation drive, as well as sustain the existing financial autonomy at the local governments so that they can execute their own projects that will impact positively on the lives of their people. Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma says his administration will continue to ensure that residents of Imo State live in peace, harmony, and in a secured environment, irrespective of religious and ethnic differences. The governor disclosed this at the government house in Owerri, the Imo State capital, while flagging off the 2023 Hajj pilgrimage for the Muslim community in Imo State. According to the governor, the state government has decided to sponsor over 100 Muslims for the 2023 Hajj pilgrimage, a feat that has not been achieved in Imo State in the last 10 years.
But I preach that we use our different faiths to preach peace in Imo State, to preach love for one another in Imo State, to support the peace and development of Imo State.
There you have it, your political roundup stories. Let's tell you that President Bola Tinubu is now in France, where he will be joining other world leaders in a summit to be hosted by the French President, President Macron. Mr. Dele Alake, the President's advisor on communications and strategy, says about 4 foreign leaders have requested to meet with President Bola Tinubu in Paris, France, where he's expected to participate in the new Global Financial Pact Summit organized by President Emmanuel Macron. The president is saying having meetings with his close advisors ahead of some of the meetings that have been scheduled ahead of the meeting, which is planned to be on the agenda of a new Global Financial Pact that places vulnerable countries on a priority list for support and investment following the devastating impact of climate change, the energy crisis, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, 2 days ago, there was an overwhelming political stories that has subsumed most of the conversations around fuel subsidy and its aftermath. But tonight, we're reopening that chapter. We're looking in depth on what the federal government and the Nigerian labor bodies are talking about. You know that the federal government representatives and the leadership of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress resumed their conversations on Monday and talks on steps to mitigate the effect of the removal of fuel subsidy by President Bola Tinubu. After that meeting at the State House, the government and the organized labor said they have agreed to set up a committee, a steering committee that would receive reports from other subcommittees within 8 weeks. Let me remind you of some of the outcome of that meeting.
We reconvened today, and then both parties went through this list, and we ticked off the viable ones. Those things are broken into 3 different categories. The immediate, those that can be of low-hanging fruit in the immediate C, then in the short run, the medium term, and the long term.
This meeting, is intentional to give life to those agreements we reached on. And as at the end of this meeting, we have set up committees in those key areas to commence work.
There is a school of thought that is of the opinion that, okay, minimum wage, because, it's a function of law. And in the law, the committees that will review minimum wage is already there statutorily. So that committee will also start their functions. So for us, those terms of reference, we could not agree broadly, totally on the final terms of reference, but we will work on that between today, tomorrow, and have the full terms of reference across all boards.
All right. That was the aftermath. I'm very sure that I'm still continuing to buy fuel at over 500. But I don't know what it's like wherever you are across the country in Nigeria, whether in Port Harcourt or in Taraba State, or you find yourself in Bauchi or in any part of Enugu or Anambra, wherever you may be across the country. What is the situation like in your area? The federal government is sitting with the organized labor and they're looking at ways to mitigate what has become a major shock. There's about 159% in increase of the price of petrol, which is a major commodity that will determine a whole lot in the economy of Nigeria. Let me let you in on what the federal government is looking at in terms of their own projections. These are some of the issues. Don't forget that the president met with members of the National Economic Council, and that was their first meeting, and he made it very clear on what he wanted as far as the economy is concerned. But the governors are also speaking about their own plans in the state, the plan for allowances for civil servants, and a host of others. But let me allow you to listen to the governor of Bauchi State, who was one of the governors who spoke after the NEC meeting, so you get a perspective on what the NEC meeting aftermath was like.
Council discussed extensively on all the multidimensional problems and challenges of arising from the increase or removal of the subsidy, and the committee is set up. We are going to use all these as working documents, because we cannot just say we will stop from where they have left off. We are starting again and again and again, so that at the end of the day we'll provide solution, we'll provide solace and succor to everybody. Was suggested as an allowance for the cost of living adjustment allowance by the...
All right, then. That's the governor of Bauchi State, Governor Bala Mohammed, briefing after the NEC meeting. But let me show you what some of these plans look like. The plans of the federal government, the agenda is to set up a presidential steering committee, and there are sub-areas: cash transfer, social investment program, cost of governance, energy, mass transit, and housing. These are sub-areas that will take them about 8 weeks to sit down, and there will be a general report on that. Let me show you yet another information that might be very important for this conversation that we'll be having tonight. And so it's the recommendations from the National Economic Council, and over 700 billion as the cost of living allowance to civil servants, and NEC committee to work out within 2 weeks modalities for organizing and distributing the palliatives. There are more plans that they have. The issue of the CNG is also there, and they are planning on a monthly basis a petroleum allowance for civil servants. So if you're in the state and you're a civil servant, brace up, you might just be a beneficiary of some of these. And there's also a possibility of obtaining funds from the World Bank and London partners to implement the program of compressed natural gas for vehicles in the country as part of measures to bring down the price of fuel. Let's take these conversations forward, everyone. I'm being joined tonight by the president of the Trade Union Congress, and of course, he's also the president of Pengesan, Comrade Festus Osifo. He joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Comrade, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sheung. Good evening, and good evening, our viewers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The meeting went well this time around, did it? On Monday, your meeting on Monday.
Yes, we had a meeting with the, the last time we met, we took like a 10 working days adjournment so that we'll all go back to the drawing board. We have discussions with our partners, and we returned back to the table. So we actually went back on Monday to have that conversation on Monday 19th. So we had that meeting, and during the meeting, we looked at different areas. We looked at where we stopped the last time. We took appraisal of the things we need to do moving forward, and how can we start implementing most of these things. Because again, Nigerians don't want a lot of talk, and it will turn to another talk shop, just as we have known. So largely, I could say the meeting went well because we agreed jointly to have the Presidential Steering Committee. Then beyond the Presidential Steering Committee, just as you have highlighted as well, some of the breakdown. But at the end of the meeting, the labor input was also sorted. In fact, I'm just coming from a meeting now where we are also trying to make further input into what you have just read. What you have just read is not the finality because we are also making our input into it.
And I know that Labour also from the TUC point of view, you have your own demands, which will come to, which a lot of people will say, since the increase in the price of fuel, it was about almost a 160% increase, and in some other states, it's more, depending on the distance of the movement of the product from Lagos up, whether north or south. And in this case, the price of commodities have changed. A lot of things have changed. Our lives are not remained the same since then. We started thinking of alternatives of some of these issues. The NNPC has been saying that there are more jobs that are being created. I don't know how true is that. You heard that, isn't it? That since the stoppage of free subsidy on petrol, that there is some provision of jobs.
Well, I think as of today, we cannot actually verify that. Maybe we wait for statistics from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, because as of today, that for us, we cannot verify. Shehu, the last time I was here, this was part of a challenge that we were talking about. That, that the provision of the subsidy was there till the end of June. That the best thing to have been done is that all parties, all stakeholders should have sat down together. What we are trying to do today were the things we were supposed to have discussed between May 29th and the end of June, so that it will not be medicine after death. If we had sat down, like the issues you've talked about, like the issues of CNG, like these other palliatives that we are talking about today, these are the palliatives that should have been discussed in 1 month prior to the end of June. But as of today, just as you have alluded to, Nigerians are facing a lot of hardship all across. And it's really hard and it's really terrible.
It's a hard time. Things were hard before the increase in the price of fuel. And the NNPC, GMD was here on this program, and they said, look, the federal government has been defaulting in the payment of the subsidy. There's a backlog. And there is provision in the budget, but the federal government has been defaulting. In reality, there's really no payment of subsidy, and there are a lot of Nigerians who believe that it was in the right direction. The likes of Bill Gates, Aliko Dangote, and some other eminent Nigerians have thought that the decision was the right one. But you are insisting, as the bodies of labor union, that there must have been some consultation. But where we are at right now, if you look at what the NEC agreed on, is it a way to go? Petroleum allowances, also CNG issues, they're also thinking about getting money from funding partners. Are you aware of that?
Yes, first of all, the challenge here is this. It's just like a company. So you have the board of directors and you have the management of a company, and you bring them in to manage the company. In most cases, when they mismanage the company, at the end of the day, they will tell you that they are declaring redundancy and that they are firing personnel. So personnel cost is always the soft target in any organization. So the same thing. We understand that Nigeria has been passing through some monetary and fiscal policies pressure over the years. But who brought us to where we are today? So it is the easiest target, the people. Okay, the only commodity that is being subsidized for the people, at the end of the day, it was taken away. So the people actually are the easiest targets. Some of the questions that Nigerians have asked over the period is that what has government brought to the table You hear today that the Salaries and Wages Commission are thinking of increasing the emolument of the political office holders. So that is what we have been asking. You are asking the people to tighten their belts. But at the end of the day, what have you brought to the table? What is the contribution of the political class to this economic logjam that we have today, or that we have today as a country? Today, for example, if you see one of the demands that you said we will get there. Yeah, if you look at it, you could see something. We talk about the cost of governance. Today, you still import all manner of cars from different parts of the world, but you have some cars that have been manufactured in Nigeria. Why can't you create policies that would encourage the manufacturing sector and also reduce the cost of governance by, for example, looking at the Nigerian-made vehicles, for example, the convoys that you see governors, they are still going about business as usual. You see the new legislatures, you see their convoys is endless. So clearly, what we are saying is that if federal government was not able to fund subsidy, at whose expense? What were the things they were doing with our funds? All the money that they have borrowed, the ways and means that went over 23 trillion, what did they do with it? They need to also offer explanations to Nigerians. Not that at the slightest provocation, they push Nigerians to the street. They push Nigerians and they tell them that we must tighten our belt. Meanwhile, they are loosening theirs. So these are all the conversations. What the governors have put on the table. Yes, these are all the issues that we are looking at as Labour. Not just the state government, even the federal government. And that is the conversations we are having in order for us to have, we are currently putting together the terms of reference of those subcommittees so that we'll look at these issues critically and we will examine them and we'll come up with a position or what we think will solve or rather ameliorate the pains of Nigerians as of today.
Before I go into some of the demands that TUC had put forward, you mentioned the issue of cost of governance. Have you put forward to the federal government that, look, if you are serious federal government or people in the executive, that you mean business. Yeah. Cut governance in these areas and in this area. Have you put forward to them practical examples of where they can cut down and tighten their bets?
Yes, absolutely. If you look at the demand that we submitted, and if you even look at the committee you talked about, there's a committee on the cost of governance.
Absolutely.
And so that is what that committee will do. And we are very serious about it. This is not lip service. It can no longer be business as usual. So when the committee gets to work, we have lists of areas, both at the federal government, at the state government, MDAs, parastatals. We have lists that we have put forward on how we think some of these issues could be mitigated. Because if we don't do that, if we don't checkmate them, at the end of the day, it's going to bite hard on the people. Because if you look at the revenue, most of our revenue today is going into recurrent expenditure. And if we continuously push our revenue to, and if we continuously push our revenue to the recurrent expenditure, and the recurrent expenditure continuously soar, they will come again tomorrow. They can even tell us to start paying 50% tax on the petroleum product.
A lot of people
those are the issues that we will...
A lot of people will even raise question mark on, for example, because I was asking for practical examples of where federal government can tighten their belt. For example, there was a report that says that it cost about 80 billion naira to fund the management of the presidential fleets in 2022. That kind of example is what Nigerians perhaps, if you're asking that federal government, if you want to look serious, or state governors or legislatures, if you want to be serious, show Nigerians examples of how tough things are and how you are cutting costs. Have you listed those kind of examples today?
You are very correct. I don't want to preempt the work of the committee, and these are part of the things that we will look at. Beyond that as well, if you look at over the years, if you look at our budgeting system, they do the envelope kind of budgeting system. If you look at the budgeting system in the last 3, 4, 5 years, you will see that a lot of items are recurring. For example, they tell you that they want to buy computers in the State House. So every year, they budget for about 1,000, 2,000 computers in the State House. If you even look at the issue of the service-wide vote, the service-wide vote, they lump in a lot of money into it. 3 trillion, 4 trillion, 5 trillion into service-wide vote, and most of this money at the end of the day, they will tell you that is the shortfalls in other ministries that they want to channel this money into, and most of these things are not audited. So if today, if you close down the service-wide vote, for example, or you reduce it by 80%, you are going to save nothing less than about 3 to 4 trillion naira. And that money can be pushed into capital expenditure. So those are some of the challenges. The presidential fleet you talked about is one of the things we will look at. What is the cost of managing it? And most of these costs, do they actually go into what they are meant for? Then in the presidency, for example, what is the cost of feeding? If you see the cost of feeding, for example, and cost of entertainment is humongous. How can we cut down that? You come to National Assembly, you see that their budget has actually gone up. So we also have to look at that because they must also sacrifice. But if you tie that to what the salaries and the wages commission are doing today, you will see that they are even jacking up the pay of the political office holders. Why those that are down there below, down there any 30,000 naira are living in misery? We must push this through.
Part of the argument that Labour been putting forward in the past few days, the issues of how the $800 million that the past government proposed to the World Bank, which they were seeking approval of the National Assembly, part of the plan, which is also recurring in the subcommittee and reflecting that they will go ahead, is the issue of cash transfers, handout like social investment programs of the federal government. And I remember you mentioned to us that you have your questions over the deployment of the resources, the data, the diary, and the register of those programs and how effective it is. And you're looking at the fact that you don't really trust it, but it's still reflective here. You think that, and you've said it, that those 5,000 naira being given to people, Nigerians, may not amount to anything.
Yes, that's correct.
But it's still reflective here.
Yes. What the committees are going to do, the subcommittees, the technical committees, they are all going to sit down. Then these processes will be reviewed, where we need to bring in some consultants to look at the data that they have. We can bring in PwC and KPMG and the likes to look at this data and actually interrogate those data, because they are telling us that they have a data that works and they believe in the process and what they are doing. We said no, that the conditional cash transfer that you have done, that it has not worked. Just as you have highlighted, we talked about the data, we talked about the BVN numbers, we talked about all these. But they also said, there was also a conversation to say that they want to expand this even to those that are the lower income earners, both in the private sector as well as the public sector. So the purpose of that committee is to now review, take holistic review of the entire system to see how functioning it is, and to also see if what they said, what they have claimed over the years that they have been doing, if it actually gets to the people. So we don't mind bringing people that are sophisticated in data analytics and those that can actually assist us in querying that process. If we don't trust the process, we will not support it.
All right. Let's look at something. And I have a few concerns here, a few questions about your proposal, the demands of the TUC to the federal government. And this was as at the 4th of June. And you said that this is for immediate implementation. One of it is that you want status quo to be maintained on the price of petrol. And that means that you want us to go, the federal government to maintain 184?
Yeah, approximately.
Yeah. So that is your first demand. But is that realistic? Because they started implementing.
When
they said there's no going back.
When you put a charter of demand, a charter of demand is not your finality. So what we put together was what we think will work. When you go into negotiations, at the end of the day, you also listen to the other party. So for us, we felt that go back, to the status quo, let us continue our conversation. But in the part of federal government, they also explained that if they go back to the status quo, that at the end of the day, and they now announce that they want to commence at the end of June, that's going to be problematic because marketers will hold their products and queues will return all over the country. So they also put that forward as well. So it was also left for us to do a review of that holistically.
Are you looking at a meeting as a middle point?
Yes, in negotiations, you always look at middle point. But overall, at the end of the day, the neck of TUC, in our meeting, what we eschewed was that, yes, we will continuously push government to go back. But we should not close door to conversations. We should not close door to negotiations. That was why we now moved on to the other list in the demand.
So you said on the second on your list of demand is minimum wage should be increased from the current 30,000 to 200,000 naira before the end of June 2023 with consequential adjustment on cost of living allowance like feeding, transport, and housing. And I asked this question. In the 2023 budget, over 8 trillion is budgeted for the current expenditure. That's over 40% of the entire budget, which a lot of people consider that is too high considering what is budgeted for capital expenditure and other things. So if you say this, I'm trying to calculate the percentage of 30,000 to 200,000. That's almost 150 or more percentage on increase that you are looking at. It then means that, for example, the recurrent expenditure 40 times 150, 40% times 150%, that's perhaps what we'll be going into. So if we have 8 trillion, the federal government should be budgeting something very high, maybe in the region of 20 trillion to be able to pay salaries.
I know. First of all, Asheun, that recurrent expenditure is not just salaries alone. If you look at the breakdown of recurrent expenditure, it's not just the salaries of civil service or civil servants. But again, if you are going to negotiation, you don't start from your rock bottom. So for us, we did an analysis of what could be the commensurate pay for Nigerian workers today to be the minimum as a benchmark. Then when we calculated that minimum, we had to add a premium to it because you must leave a room for dialogue, you must leave some room for negotiations. We've been asked, why 200,000 naira? And for us, it was very simple. You know, we had some conversation a while ago, I think it was in this station, in one of your sister's program, where we stated that the reason we went to that was because we know that federal government wanted to float the currency. Today, you know that if before now, if government was selling, let's assume they said they were spending 4 billion naira on the subsidy per month. If that is anything to go by, what that means is that because today the naira has been floated, you know, that 400 billion naira was actually based on 450 naira CBN exchange rate to $1. But today, it is about 700 plus, which is almost about 70–80% much more. So if that is correct, what that means is that they would have been spending nothing less than 700 billion naira per month. So the question we have asked is that if you were the money that you have saved, they said they will save money. So what percentage of this money will go to Nigerians, number one? And secondly, as well, if you look at when the minimum wage was agreed on in 2019, what was our inflation rate as at 2019? What was the purchasing power parity? What was the so if you put all these economic indicators together, and as at then the exchange rate as at 2019 was about 360 naira. So if you put all these together, you look at the inflation between 2019 and today. By the time you compound that inflation, it's over 80%. Then when you now also look at the exchange rate between that time and now, you could see that the exchange rate has also moved by appreciable percentage. So when you compare this into the 30,000, you could see that there is need for us to do something massive. Not just something minimal, but something massive. Yeah. So again, Sheun, to anchor that here, as government must put on their thinking cap. You cannot continuously tell us. I mean, we can't continue business as usual. You must put on your thinking cap on how to generate revenue. You must put on your thinking cap on how to attract foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. This is why government exists. Government is not, I mean, there's no easy solution anywhere.
Yeah. Comrade, there's a whole long list that you have demanded. I've touched on a bit of some of those that are very critical, the cost and a few other things, the CNG and or what have you. We'll look at how the negotiations continue in the coming days, and hopefully whatever the government is putting forward, it does look to me that the government is between the wall and a hard place, and there's no place to turn. Now they can't go back on their decision. The Nigerian people are suffering and feeling the heat, then they need to face it and be able to deal with the issue, and I hope that they take the right decision. Thank you so much, Comrade Festus Osifo, President of TUC. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much, Sheldon, for having me. Yeah, thank you.
We take a break, everyone. And when we come back, is it true that RAMFAC, the Revenue and Mobilization Allocation Commission, have they really plan to jack up the salaries or wages or a monument of compensation of some political office holders? Is it true? We'll find out after this program. Then, the Tinubu economic policies since assumption of office. We'll get an economic insight from an economic expert tonight on the program. Stick around with me, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much indeed, everyone, for some of the information that have been coming out. There are a lot of movement, actually, in respect of the effect of the subsidy removal regime in Nigeria from the day President Tinubu mentioned it on the 29th of May at the Eagle Square. There were consequences. The consequences are very straightforward. Increase in price of the product of petrol, increase in price of commodity, and the consequence, it goes on and on. So at the NEC meeting, there were proposals that were being made. Part of it was about 702 billion. Several other issues were raised. But the information that we have is that there was a committee that has been set up. Part of the issue that has been raised is that are there data to this effect? Are there data to support what is available and what can be dished out? The fact is that they are now working the books to ensure that the data and their figures are correct. We understand that the governors met for the first time yesterday after their NEC meeting, which set up that committee, and they have begun work on it. That's as far as we know. So we keep pushing the information so that Nigerians can have the benefit and the insight into what exactly is going on. But let me also tell you, you perhaps have been reading about the story of the possible increase in emoluments, wages of some political office holders. But that commission, RAMFAC, tonight had debunked and denied the official who made that statement. They said, look, that position was made, and since February, that position has been made, but the process is not finalized, and it has not been concluded, and so it is false. That is false as far as we know. But then, if there is any increase, which means that some of those who are earning about 2 million would have been earning 8 million and above. That will be the consequence. But let's get some perspectives. Under the Tinubu presidency, the figures are changing. The prices of commodities are changing. Your life is probably changing because what you are able to put on the table and the money in your pocket is also being affected. Dr. Paul Alaje, an economist, joins us live here in our studio. Thank you so much, Dr. Alaje, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Interesting times, isn't it?
Yes, very, very interesting moment. We are changing or transforming from a kind of economy we used to know to a completely different, a more competitive economy. Now, what you used to know about yourself in 2019 or 21, when you earned 250,000, that same amount by December this year, without the policies and increases that we are seeing in the country recently, in terms of value, would have reduced to 100,000 naira. That is what the National Bureau of Statistics said.
About more than 50%.
Inflation, yes, because inflation is an average of 20% per annum. So if you take 20% off in 2021, by December 31st, 20% off in 2022 by December 31st, and another 20% by December 23. By December 31st, 2023. In all of these, we have not yet spoken about potential increase in inflation. Now, we are taking necessary injection as a country, because when you look at what the component of capital expenditure for the country, it has remained less than 30%, about 25%. It may even go further down. But when you look at what we spend on servicing debt under the last budget, what we spent about subsidy, in fact, we should have spent approximately 7 trillion naira on subsidy. And when you add approximately 3 to 5 trillion naira to that, you see that if you put 19 states together in terms of their budget, I'm not sure they would have all of those. That is what we would have spent in two patterns: subsidy and debt service. Perhaps that is why we are having some of these policy come up. And I'm speaking for, but there are several other arguments against some of the policy, because for every economic decision you make, there is what we call trade-off. So you want to reduce inflation, be ready to increase unemployment. You want to reduce unemployment if it is not based on creating more jobs. It is by just adjusting methodology, for instance, from, say, 20 hours a week to 1 hour a week. You think you have adjusted unemployment, but you're actually creating bigger challenges because of the kind of economy that we live and the kind of nature of the economy that we have in the country.
Let's break it down to how an average Nigerian worker can perceive this. So I'm looking, you were listening to the conversation between myself and Festus, the TUC president. The demand of labor include, the TUC specifically includes jacking up workers' wages from 30,000 as a minimum wage to 200,000. That, I don't know what percentage that is now. And petrol price came from 184 thereabout to over 500,000 naira. 500 naira. So it means that it's about 160% increase. Give us a sense of what this means. The purchasing power of an average citizen. If the approval comes, and I don't know what the federal government will approve eventually, whether or not 200,000 naira still is reasonable based on your analysis that if you were earning or you have 250,000 naira about 3 years ago, it comes to about 100,000 naira in Nigeria of today.
And that has no impact with the current subsidy removal. It has no impact on what exchange rate policy has been. It's just inflation that has been happening in Nigeria at not less than 20% on the average, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, with this new policy of removing subsidy, what we've done, when you look at national income equation, we said that national income equation is a function of what we are all consuming as household, the total investment in our country, and government expenditure. We need to pause there. Let's assume it's a closed economy, because if it's open, you look at the difference between import and export. But if it's a closed economy, you are looking at government expenditure. Subsidy is a government expenditure. Government is saying, hey guys, I'm
no longer spending
I'm not going to babysit you anymore. Yeah. It's not going to be a competitive economy. Government will not intervene. So government removes hand and say, household and firm, you have to pay. So this is breaking down the implication of the economy.
Meanwhile, what they used to have, the value of what they have has been reduced.
Now
from the reduction, the little that they have now, they have to now pay more.
Exactly.
For petrol.
Here is the challenge. The money they have is reducing. Government revenue is also spent on subsidy, trying to help household and firms. So here is the challenge. For government needs to survive. Government needs to have its two legs, on. If not, if government has, every year we have not built any infrastructure. So in all of this, if subsidy must be removed, I'd mentioned time and again, even on this program, what must be done first?
What is that?
First of all, we need to have local refineries functioning. But we've gone past that argument because subsidy has been removed. That would have been the best, because when you say subsidy is not removed, if exchange rate changes from what it is today to any rate, say 750, 800 at official window, be ready to buy PMS at not less than 700 liters, 700 naira per liter in Abuja. You know why? Because we don't have control. It's completely outside our control.
Hands.
Yeah, so we have to pay more. But if it's happening locally, government might decide to partner
to control
to control the prices. Then we know that economy will be relatively stable because exchange rate is out of our control. We import a lot of commodities to the country, even though we export some kind of commodity. So we are hoping that if we have local refinery, they will reduce the pressure on the foreign reserve that we have that is giving us all of these challenges. So that said, too, what will drive even more inflation is food inflation. Because with the new policy, the person that is selling corn, even very close by, we all eat corn. This is a period where people are buying corn and selling all over the place, you know, all over our country. The question is, the price of corn that was 70 or 50 naira last year is now 100 to 150 this year. What has happened? Does it mean that to plant corn, you need petrol, you need dollar? The answer is no. Because the man that is planting also lives in this same economy. And his income has been depleted. For him to keep living, he needs to increase the prices. Right. That will affect rents. That will affect a number of things, cost of transportation. Yeah. So for you to earn more, for you to continue to live, you had better look for more means to earn more. But if time permits, we may share some other revelation.
So, for my audience on this program tonight, I'd like you to break it down. Let's talk, because corn that you mentioned has a political connotation. It has been used on Twitter during the election period. So when you say corn is expensive, there are some guys who will probably begin a war on Twitter tonight about the cost of corn and what corn means. But jokes apart, let's get a bit more serious on the impact of some of the policies of the Tinubu presidency. Just in 1 month that this government came into power, there are policy decisions and directives that are totally altered a lot of things. But some have argued that it will be a momentary pain, but for, again, some kind of gain in the nearest future. But let's be realistic and speak truth to ourselves as a family, as a people in this country. Are we to expect more pain in the coming days?
I think we should expect more pains. What is important?
How painful would it be?
Well, it will be very painful. There are so many other things, structural changes that has not been done in this country for a long time. So if there is anything you must give to the current president, is taking some structural changes. His statement, his policy are reforms in some ways. So you see the issue of FX, as dangerous as it is. Let me start with the issue of subsidy. Every gain from subsidy, so that we don't lose sight of all of this. President Buhari started the same thing, but people may forget. When he got to office, exchange rate was 199. Within 3 weeks, after a lot of pressure came from all over economies and all of those, he allowed central bank, gave central bank the permission to do the same thing President Tinubu did. Unfortunately, the administration did not invest all the gains that were made on that policy on infrastructure. So we saw some of the money went into the current expenditure. Eventually, the first year we saw 70-30. A lot of people were happy. Second year, 70-30. After that, it wasn't 70-30. So this administration must ensure that all the gains made from, what's it called now? All the gain made from subsidy removal goes directly into infrastructure. Yeah. That is how it can benefit people, because it will form part of government expenditure and investment. Then you're going to see more jobs, you're going to see more development. This is priority for government.
But it's as if we're working on eggshells right now.
Exactly.
And government needs to be very careful with its policy, because every of the policy can trigger one thing. And when that trigger comes, it has a dovetailing effect. Yes. And the people will bear the brunt. So here is... Say, for example, how long could this pain be? Because I'm imagining a lot of things. I'm graphic in my imagination. Say the first 6 months might be a bit turbulent, isn't it?
No, it's already turbulent. If it's going worse than the pressure, but I can tell you the pressure of exchange rate and subsidy will be with us for a while. In fact, inflation may remain double-digit, perhaps for the next 1 year. That's the truth. Any economist that want to tell you the truth will tell you, because the two policies are coming at the same time. So if you put any other policy that will induce inflation, then it might be too dangerous. So we can see how to manage these two economic policies side by side for a while. And that is why it's important to look at structural changes in a long-term perspective, not what we can just do now and see what the implication will be.
And the consequence might be the more difficult decisions this government might make them politically unpopular.
Exactly. But you see, it's important. I love to play the devil's advocate. It's important to make some tough decisions, but we should not lose sight of 133 million people that are living below poverty line. They are living in multidimensional poverty, I beg your pardon. Over 80 million people living below poverty line. So we need to balance all of these conversations. For me, it's important for us to say we have removed subsidy, even though there are things that should have been done before subsidy is removed. They are not done. What are we going to do? If you increase salary from 35,000 or 30,000 to 200,000, that would be a recipe for disaster.
Wow.
Because inflation is expected to go to above 30%. But does that mean you should not increase salary? No. You must increase people's income. But how do we do that? And all we drive this increase, that means there must be more opportunities for private sector to generate more income so that the economy can grow. And that is why for all of this to happen, government must invest 100% of all gains, about 7 trillion naira additional into infrastructure. So if you had invested 5 or 6 trillion in 2023...
Which kind of infrastructure are you looking at?
Rail, road, infrastructure, education, direct impact on the life of people.
There are those who are suggesting now that there may be possibility of sale of assets. Is that a reasonable thing to do?
Well,
to get more money. The last government has said we have a revenue problem.
Well, it depends on where. I don't really think generating revenue is an issue. I think the method we're looking at generating revenue is an issue. There are other revenue windows that we are not even optimizing, especially for subnationals, for states. There are so many revenue windows that states are not looking at. And that is why, if you ask me, subnationals will benefit a lot from subsidy removal because it's more revenue to them. Because when you get to fact, they have more money to share. But all of those money must go into infrastructure. This is because when people see the pain they are going through now, what makes it momentary is when they are able to plug into a private economy, private sector-driven economy or project government of their state is having, and they are able to increase their revenue or their income from that window. But if that not be the case, then I hope that you not lead to some crisis in their future.
Let me get a 30 seconds economic consultancy from you for free and for the benefit of our viewers tonight. If you are advising anyone earning about 250,000, 300,000, or even 500,000 out there, and you have said, things might be tougher in the coming days. That means they have to tighten their belt and be able to do what exactly should they be looking forward to? What in terms of their expenditure and their purchasing capacity, what should they be looking at? Just in 30 seconds.
Well, you need to buy only those things that are very essential to your living. It's important you put your money in what, quote and unquote, will give you value or will give you value in medium term and in the long term. If you put all your money liquid in your hand and you are not integrating it to economy, such as putting it in real estate, when I say real estate, I'm not referring to just brick and mortar, everything that represents real estate, part of that income must go into it. The poor man remains poor because he spends everything he has and at the end of the day, he's looking for what to invest. But a rich man is not necessarily the man with billion or trillion, but the man that had invested first. The best time to invest is when things are tough because the gains are usually high. Now, you see, President Tinubu's administration will soon be looking for money, and that means that treasury bill rates may even be higher. But it is money that you have saved that you can invest in T-bills or bond in a matter of time. Central Bank will soon announce, or you see federal government bond and all of those. That said, buying things in bulk is always the way to go. Whatever you have now, trying to wait for tomorrow may not be the same. The price of 2x2 angle iron is not what it was last week. The price has increased because of policies of government. And I can tell you, the price may further increase because the impact of subsidy, we are just seeing it with FX at the same time. In the coming months, especially by first week of July, the impact will be fully here and we might have to deal with it for the next 6 months. And that may drive inflation up to the end of this end of the year and maybe first quarter of next year before we now start seeing readjustment. But It can reduce if government investment will significantly improve in real sector.
All right.
And I believe that. Also, the good news about all of this is that foreign investors may eventually want to come to our country because they know that the value of the money will agree with what the international community thinks about. So we hope that when we are, as we're attracting investment, we can also invest money, as country, nation or state, all of the money that comes should go into the development of the state and not to increase individual salary as the case may be.
Well, Dr. Paul Alaje, what an interesting time that we're in. And my answer just with a lot of Nigerians who are going through a tough time and they're just hoping that they get their balance and get their lives together. We'll get out of these as a people. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you so much.
There might be tough times, but look, tough times don't last. What tough people do. Get it together, Nigerians, and we get through these. That's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. God bless Nigeria.